At 72 years old, I signed away everything to my husband during our divorce. My lawyer practically begged me to reconsider, but I picked up that pen, looked my husband's attorney straight in the eye, and signed every single page. Nobody in that room knew what I'd already figured out. They just hadn't realized it yet. Let me tell you how a woman who spent 45 years keeping receipts became a woman who kept her dignity. Please, if my story resonates with you, let me know which city you're listening from. I want to see how far this travels, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. And what I did about it? Well, that's why you're still listening. My name is Alberta Highmore, and for 45 years, I thought I knew my husband. Percy and I built our life together from absolutely nothing. We met in 1978 at a community college in Hartford, Connecticut, both of us taking night classes while working day jobs. He was studying automotive repair. I was studying business administration. We got married 6 months later in a ceremony that cost less than $200. My dress came from a consignment shop. Our wedding cake was made by Percy's aunt. We honeymooned at a bed and breakfast 90 minutes away because that's all we could afford. But we were happy. God, we were happy. In 1983, we opened Highmore Automotive Solutions in a rented garage in Bridgeport. Percy handled the mechanical work. He had magic hands when it came to engines. I managed everything else: bookkeeping, customer relations, ordering parts, paying suppliers, processing payroll when we finally hired our first employee in 1985. We worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. On Sundays, we'd sleep until noon and have breakfast for dinner. We had 2 children. Emma arrived in 1980, Daniel in 1983. I'd bring them to the shop after school, let them do homework in the back office while I reconciled accounts. Emma would help me file papers. Daniel would hand Percy tools and learn about carburetors. The business grew slowly but steadily. By 1995, we had 12 employees. By 2005, we'd moved to a proper facility with 6 service bays. By 2010, when I retired at 66, we were grossing over $1 million annually. I say we because that's what it was. We built it together. But somewhere along the way, Percy started saying I instead of we. It started so gradually I almost didn't notice. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning last April. I was making coffee when Percy walked into the kitchen wearing cologne. Now Percy hadn't worn cologne in at least a decade. After working around motor oil and brake fluid for 40 years, he'd said he preferred to smell like nothing at all. But that morning, there it was, something expensive and woody that I definitely hadn't bought him. "That's a new scent," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just something I picked up." He was looking at his phone, not at me. "I've got a meeting in Hartford today. Might be late." "On a Tuesday? New supplier. Could be a good contract." He kissed my forehead, a quick distracted peck, and left before I could ask anything else. I stood in our kitchen, coffee cup halfway to my lips, feeling a tiny pinprick of something I couldn't quite name. Not suspicion, not yet, just awareness. Like when you first notice a strange noise in your car engine and you tell yourself it's probably nothing. The cologne incident might have remained just that, an incident, if it hadn't been followed by others. Percy joined a gym. At 68, he suddenly decided he needed to get in shape. He bought new clothes. Fitted shirts instead of his usual loose polos, dark wash jeans that actually had a brand name. He upgraded his phone and password protected it. When I asked why, he said something about security protocols that one of our younger employees had recommended. Our younger employees who'd been laid off 2 years ago during the pandemic. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because a part of me, the part that had loved this man for 45 years, kept whispering, maybe he's just going through something. Men his age, they get scared of mortality. This is probably just a phase. I wanted so desperately to believe that. Then came the credit card statement. I'd always handled our personal finances, just like I'd handled the business bookkeeping. Percy earned the money, I managed it. That was our system. It worked. So when the Visa statement arrived in mid-May, I opened it like I'd opened hundreds before. Le Bernardin, New York City, $487.63. I stared at that line for a full minute. Le Bernardin was one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan. We'd never eaten there, not in 45 years of marriage. For our 40th anniversary, we'd gone to a nice steakhouse in Stamford and thought we were splurging. I called Percy at the shop. "Honey, there's a charge here from a restaurant in New York. Le Bernardin? Do you remember what that was for?" A pause. Too long of a pause. "Oh, that. Business dinner with a potential client. Guy owns a fleet of delivery trucks. Could be a huge account. $487 seems steep for a business dinner." He brought his business partner. It was 3 of us. Percy's voice had that edge it got when he thought I was questioning his judgment. "Alberta, if you're going to nickel and dime every business expense, I can just, I'm not nickel and diming anything. I was just curious." "Well, don't worry about it. I've got to go. Got a customer waiting." He hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat at our dining room table with that credit card statement spread in front of me, and I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding for weeks. My husband is having an affair. The realization didn't hit me like a thunderbolt. It settled over me like a heavy blanket, smothering, suffocating, inescapable. I could have confronted him right then. Maybe I should have. But instead, I did what I'd done for 45 years in our business. I started gathering documentation. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I didn't snoop through Percy's phone. I wouldn't even know his password. I didn't hire a private investigator or follow him around town. I just paid attention to the paper trail. More restaurant charges. Hotels in Hartford and New Haven. Mid-range places. Nothing too flashy. Always on weeknights. Jewelry purchases from a boutique I'd never heard of. The jewelry never appeared in my drawer. I started a folder. Every statement, every receipt, every odd charge. I documented it all in a manila folder I kept in my craft room, the one place Percy never went. The habit came naturally. I'd spent 25 years maintaining meticulous records for Highmore Automotive. Every invoice, every payment, every expense. I'd filed it all. Percy used to tease me about it. "Alberta and her filing system," he'd say to customers. "She could find a receipt from 1984 if you asked her." I could indeed. On a Wednesday in early June, I was taking Percy's gray suit jacket to the dry cleaner when I checked the pockets, something I always did. In the inside pocket, I found a boarding pass, Delta Flight 1247, Hartford to Providenciales, Turks and Caicos. Departure, May 18th. I stood in our bedroom, holding that boarding pass, and tried to remember May 18th. Percy had said he was going to a regional automotive conference in Cleveland. 3 days, he'd said. Very boring, he'd said. He'd even complained about Cleveland's weather when he got back. But Cleveland is not Turks and Caicos. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and did something I never thought I'd do. I searched for Percy on social media. We didn't use it much. Emma had set up Facebook accounts for us years ago, but we barely posted. I found Percy's profile, clicked on his photos. There, tagged by the Coral Reef Resort, was a photo from May 19th. Percy in swim trunks, standing on a beach with crystal blue water behind him. He looked happy. He looked tan. He looked 20 years younger. And standing next to him, her arm around his waist, was a woman I'd never seen before. Blonde, young, so young, with a bright smile and a string bikini. The caption read, "Paradise with my favorite person. I sat down on our bed, the bed Percy and I had shared for 43 years, and I finally let myself cry." That evening, I waited until Percy came home from the shop. I had his favorite dinner ready, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same meal I'd made every Wednesday for decades. I set the table like normal. I poured his beer like normal. I smiled when he walked in like normal. And then, after he'd taken his first bite, I placed the boarding pass on the table between us. "Cleveland's nice this time of year," I said quietly. Or was it Turks and Caicos? Percy's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at the boarding pass, then at me, and I watched his face go through 3 expressions in rapid succession. Shock, panic, calculation. He chose calculation. "Alberta, I can explain. Her name is Victoria," I interrupted. I'd found out through Facebook. Victoria Sterling, age 34, CPA, works in Hartford. How long? Percy set down his fork. For just a moment, I saw something raw cross his face. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, but it hardened quickly into something else, something defensive. 2 years, he said, just like that. 2 years, said like it was nothing. 2 years, I repeated. The pot roast smell was making me nauseous. Were you ever going to tell me? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was trying to solve a problem. Alberta, look, you and things haven't been right between us for a long time. You know that. No, Percy, I don't know that. Tell me. We're roommates. When's the last time we went on a date? When's the last time we really talked about anything except bills and doctor's appointments? I'm 68 years old, and I felt like I was just waiting around to die. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I kept my voice steady. So you found someone who makes you feel alive? Yes. He looked almost relieved that I understood. Victoria, she gets me. She makes me laugh. She makes me feel like Percy, not just Alberta's husband or the mechanic. Do you understand? I understand that you've been lying to me for 2 years. I understand that you used our money to take another woman on vacation. I understand. My voice finally broke. I understand that you didn't even respect me enough to end our marriage before starting a new one. Percy's jaw tightened. I want a divorce. The room went very still. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog was barking. Our refrigerator hummed. The pot roast was getting cold. All right, I said. We'll split things fairly. The house, the retirement accounts, your share of the business. About that. Percy's voice changed. It became businesslike, almost cold. Alberta, the business is in my name. The house is in my name. I've been very careful about that. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? We built that business together. You helped, yes, especially in the early years, but you were never officially on payroll for most of it. You stopped working there 15 years ago. The business is mine, Alberta. Legally, completely mine. Percy, I worked there for 25 years. As a volunteer, essentially. Good luck proving otherwise in court. He stood up, adjusted his shirt, one of the new fitted ones. My lawyer will contact you. I suggest you get one too. We can handle this like adults. He walked out of the dining room, packed a bag in our bedroom, and left. Just like that. 45 years, ended over cold pot roast. 3 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office in downtown Hartford. James Richardson had been recommended by Emma, who'd called the morning after Percy left, crying and furious in equal measure. Mom, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Promise me you'll get a lawyer. James was in his mid-50s with kind eyes and a reputation for being fair. He'd listened to my story for 45 minutes, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Now he was reviewing the settlement proposal Percy's lawyer, a woman named Patricia Mills, had sent over. His frown deepened with every page. Mrs. Highmore, he finally said, looking up. This is robbery. I know. He's offering you $50,000 and the furniture. That's it. James flipped through pages. The business is worth at least $2 million. The house is worth $850,000. Your retirement accounts total another $300,000. He shook his head. This is insulting. What are my chances if we fight? James hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Honestly, it's complicated. He structured everything very carefully over the years. The business is solely in his name. The house is solely in his name. You stopped working at the shop in 2010. He softened his voice. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, which means the court tries to be fair. You'd definitely get something. But proving your contribution after all these years without your name on the paperwork, how long would it take? A contested divorce with business valuation? 2 years, maybe 3. Legal fees could run you $100,000 or more. And at the end of it, he trailed off. At the end of it, I might get less than if I just settled now. It's possible. I looked out his office window at the Hartford skyline. The city where I'd spent my entire adult life. Where I'd built a business, raised children, made a home. What if I just sign? I asked quietly. James's head snapped up. I'm sorry? What if I agree to his terms, just sign everything over and walk away? Mrs. Highmore, I strongly advise against that. You'd be giving up your rights to... I understand what I'd be giving up. I met his eyes. Can you arrange the signing? Soon? He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Mrs. Highmore, please think about your future. You're 72 years old. Where will you live? How will you support yourself on $50,000? A strange calm had settled over me. Can you set it up or not? Yes, if you're certain. But I need you to understand that once you sign... I understand, James. Please arrange it. The signing took place in Patricia Mills's office on a Friday afternoon. It was a modern space, all glass and steel, overlooking the Connecticut River. Percy wasn't there. Too painful, Patricia said with what might have been actual sympathy. But I'm authorized to finalize everything on his behalf. The papers were already spread across the conference table. 15 pages of legal language that essentially said, Alberta Highmore gets nothing and Percy Highmore gets everything. James made one last attempt. Mrs. Highmore, it's not too late. We can walk out of here right now and file a proper response. Fight this. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of pen that signs important documents. My hand was remarkably steady. I'm sure, I said. I signed every page, my full legal name, over and over. Alberta Grace Highmore. I watched Patricia Mills try and fail to hide a small smile of satisfaction. I heard James sigh beside me, resignation heavy in that sound. When I signed the last page, Patricia immediately gathered up the papers. Congratulations on reaching an amicable resolution, she said, in a tone that suggested she thought I was the biggest fool she'd ever met. We'll file these with the court next week. You should receive your settlement check within 30 days. When exactly will you file? I asked. Wednesday or Thursday, most likely. We need to process everything first. I nodded, stood, shook her hand, thanked James for his help, and then I walked out of that office building into the June sunshine, my entire future signed away on 15 pages of legal paper. I sat in my car, a 12-year-old Toyota Camry that Percy had never bothered to put in his name, for a long time. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and for just a moment, panic clawed at my throat. What have I done? Then I took a breath, started the engine, and drove to the self-storage facility in Bridgeport where I'd moved 12 filing cabinets 2 weeks earlier. 45 years of receipts, 45 years of records, 45 years of proof. Patricia Mills had 5 days before she filed those papers with the court. I had 5 days to prove she'd made the biggest mistake of her legal career. But first, I needed a different kind of lawyer. The kind Percy was going to wish he'd never made me call. That evening, I stood in front of storage unit number 247 at Bridgeport Self-Storage, watching the metal door roll up with a grinding screech. Inside were 12 filing cabinets. Forest green, slightly dented, exactly as I remembered them. Percy had laughed when I bought them back in 1985. Alberta, honey, we're a small shop. You really need that many drawers? But I'd insisted. 1 cabinet for business records, 1 for personal documents, 1 for tax papers. Eventually, we'd needed all 12. When Percy had started talking about simplifying and going digital 3 years ago, I'd nodded along. Sure, honey, whatever you think is best. And then I'd quietly rented this storage unit and moved every single cabinet here. Told him I donated them to a charity. Percy never checked. Percy trusted me. Isn't that ironic? I'd brought supplies, a camping lantern, a thermos of coffee, my reading glasses, a legal pad. The facility closed at 11. I had 5 hours. I started with cabinet number 1, business records, 1983-1990. My back ached within the first hour. These cabinets weren't organized for speed. They were organized for accuracy. Every document in chronological order, every receipt in its proper folder. It had driven Percy crazy sometimes, my insistence on proper filing. Alberta, you'll spend 30 minutes finding the perfect spot for a receipt instead of just throwing it in a box. Now I was grateful for every one of those 30 minutes. By 9 p.m., I'd gone through 3 cabinets and my coffee was cold. I'd found useful things. Letters, invoices, tax returns showing joint income. But nothing definitive. Nothing that would make a judge sit up and take notice. My phone buzzed. Emma. Mom, are you okay? Daniel's freaking out. Dad told him you signed everything away. I texted back. I'm fine, sweetheart. Trust me. Tell your brother I know what I'm doing. I hoped that was true. Cabinet number 4 was personal documents, 1985 to 1995. I almost skipped it. What could personal papers tell me about the business? But my filing system had a rule. When in doubt, check everything. That's when I found it. A folder labeled Business Formation and Restructuring. Inside was the original business registration from 1983, filed with the state of Connecticut. The paper was yellowed, the typewriter font faded, but the words were crystal clear. Highmore Automotive Solutions, business type, partnership, owners, Percy James Highmore and Alberta Grace Highmore. Filed November 3rd, 1983. My hands started shaking. We'd registered it together. Both our names, right there in official state records. Percy had filed papers to change it to a sole proprietorship in 1990. But this proved I'd been a founding partner. I kept digging through that folder, and my heart rate kicked up with each document I found. A 1985 letter to a parts supplier, signed Percy and Alberta Highmore co-proprietors. A 1987 business loan application where I was listed as co-applicant and co-owner. Insurance documents from 1986 naming both of us as business owners. Tax returns from 1985 through 1989 where the business income was reported jointly. Every single one contradicted Percy's claim that he'd built the business alone. But the document that made me sit down hard on the concrete floor of that storage unit was tucked in the very back of the folder. A single page, handwritten, dated October 15th, 1989. It was Percy's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. He'd always written with a slight right slant, pressing hard enough to leave indentations on the page below. Notes from meeting with accountant Howard Sterling. 10/15/1989. Restructure business to sole prop under my name only. Tax advantages can write off more expenses. Alberta agrees. She trusts me. We'll transfer house to my name when we refinance. Better interest rate. Note: keep original partnership docs. Might need for SBA loan backup. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Alberta agrees. She trusts me. I remembered that conversation. We'd been in our tiny apartment above the shop, sitting at our kitchen table. Howard Sterling had explained that for tax purposes, it would be simpler if the business was under one name. Percy had looked at me with those blue eyes and said, "You trust me, right, honey? This is just paperwork. Doesn't change that we're partners." And I'd believed him, because why wouldn't I? We were married. We were a team. Except Percy hadn't just reorganized for taxes. He'd been building a fortress, brick by brick, with me helping him mix the mortar. And he'd kept this note, this reminder to himself that I'd trusted him like it was some kind of insurance policy. I sat on that cold concrete floor until my phone alarm went off at 10:45 p.m., warning me the facility was about to close. I carefully gathered every relevant document, made a stack of photocopies using the office machine by the front desk, and drove home to my daughter's house where I'd been staying. Emma was waiting up. "Mom, you look terrible. Are you okay?" I showed her the 1983 registration, the 1989 note. She read them, and her face went through the same progression mine had. Confusion, realization, fury. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. "He planned this. For years he's been planning this." "Not years," I corrected quietly. "I don't think he planned to leave me back in 1989, but when he decided to, he realized he'd already built the perfect trap. All he had to do was spring it. What are you going to do? I thought about James Richardson, kind and cautious, who told me I'd probably lose in court. I thought about Patricia Mills, smug and satisfied, who thought she'd just won her client everything. I'm going to hire a different lawyer, I said. Someone who knows how to fight dirty. William Foster's office didn't look like James Richardson's. No warm wood paneling, no family photos, just white walls, glass desk, and law books arranged with military precision. The man himself was 58, with silver hair cut short and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Mrs. Highmore," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but not crushing. "Emma speaks very highly of you. She says you need someone aggressive. I need someone who understands financial fraud." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Tell me everything." I did. The affair, the settlement, my signing of the papers, and most importantly, what I'd found in my filing cabinets. I spread the documents across his desk like playing cards. William examined each one in silence. When he got to Percy's handwritten note, he let out a low whistle. "Alberta trusts me," he read aloud. "Did you know he kept this?" "No, I didn't even know it existed until last night." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Mrs. Highmore, I'm going to be honest with you. You signed those settlement papers. That's a problem. A big problem." He paused. But you signed under what we call fraudulent inducement. Percy represented to you that he was the sole owner of the business. These documents prove he knew that was a lie. More than that. He tapped the handwritten note. This proves he deliberately structured things to cut you out, using your trust against you. Can we stop the settlement? Patricia Mills said she'd file Wednesday or Thursday. Today's Monday. That gives us 2, maybe 3 days. He was already reaching for his phone. We file an emergency motion to set aside the settlement agreement. Grounds: fraud, failure to disclose marital assets, and signing under duress due to material misrepresentation. Will it work? William's smile was sharp. "Mrs. Highmore, I spent 15 years as a prosecutor going after white-collar criminals. Men who thought they were clever, who thought they'd covered their tracks. You know what usually got them caught?" "What?" "They kept notes, records, evidence of their own crimes because they thought they were too smart to get caught." He held up Percy's handwritten memo. "Your husband just confessed to financial fraud in his own handwriting. We're going to bury him with it." He made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. The first was to Patricia Mills, informing her that he was now representing me and that she should halt all filings immediately. The second was to the courthouse, requesting an emergency hearing. The third was to someone named Jennifer Walsh. "Jennifer's a forensic accountant," William explained after he hung up. "The best in Connecticut. We're going to need her to examine Highmore Automotive's books. If Percy's been hiding assets or moving money around, and I'd bet my license he has, she'll find it." "How much is this going to cost?" He named a figure that made me wince. But then I thought about Percy on a beach in Turks and Caicos, about $50,000 and a used Honda Accord, about "Alberta trusts me," written in his own hand. "Do it," I said. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. William filed the motion Tuesday afternoon, and by Tuesday evening, Patricia Mills called him. I was sitting in William's office when his phone rang. He put it on speaker. "Will, what the hell is your client doing?" Patricia's voice was tight with anger. "We had a signed settlement agreement." "A settlement agreement obtained through fraud and material misrepresentation," William said calmly. "My client has evidence that Mr. Highmore deliberately misrepresented his ownership of the business." "That's ridiculous. The business is registered in his name since 1990. Before that, it was jointly owned. My client has the original 1983 registration. She also has documentation of Mr. Highmore's deliberate strategy to restructure the business to exclude her, including written notes in his own hand acknowledging her trust in him." Silence on the other end. "Patricia," William continued, "I'm also filing a motion for immediate forensic examination of Highmore Automotive Solutions. My client has evidence of significant personal expenditures charged to the business over the past 3 years. expenditures related to Mr. Highmore's extramarital affair. You can't prove boarding passes to Turks and Caicos charged to the business credit card, hotel rooms in Hartford, restaurant bills for two at establishments where no business was conducted, all documented, all traceable. William's voice was steel wrapped in silk. And if we find that Mr. Highmore has been systematically siphoning marital assets to fund his affair, well, that's embezzlement, Patricia. That's fraud. And that's before we even talk about the offshore accounts. What offshore accounts? The ones Jennifer Walsh is going to find when she audits the books. He was bluffing about the offshore accounts. We didn't know yet if they existed. But the way Patricia's voice changed told me William had hit a nerve. I need to consult with my client, she said finally. You do that. See you in court Thursday. He hung up, looked at me. He's got offshore accounts. How do you know? Because she didn't deny it. If there was nothing to find, she'd have said so. But she hedged, which means Percy's been even busier than we thought. My phone rang. Percy. Don't answer it, William advised. I want to hear what he has to say. I picked up, put it on speaker. Alberta. Percy's voice was strained, controlled. We need to talk. We have nothing to say to each other, Percy. You can speak to my lawyer. I hired William Foster. I let that sink in. You know what he is? He's a former prosecutor who specialized in financial fraud. He's going to take apart Highmore Automotive piece by piece until he finds every dollar you've hidden, every expense you've fraudulently charged, every account you thought I didn't know about. You're making a mistake, Alberta. You signed those papers under fraudulent pretenses. I found your note, Percy, from 1989, the one where you wrote Alberta trusts me like it was some kind of joke. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said. October 15th, 1989. Meeting notes with Howard Sterling. Your handwriting, your words. Want me to read it to you? More silence. Percy, you used my trust as a weapon. You spent 45 years building a fortress to keep me out, and you made me help you do it. So yes, I'm fighting back, and I'm going to win. You can't win. The business is mine. The business was ours. I have the original registration. I have letters. I have tax returns. I have 25 years of evidence that you've spent the last 15 years trying to erase. My voice was shaking now, but not with fear, with anger. Pure, righteous anger. You tried to steal my life's work, Percy. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Victoria and I love each other, he said, and his voice had changed, become almost pleading. I deserve to be happy, to start over. Don't ruin this for me, Alberta. Start over with what belongs to you, Percy, not with what belongs to both of us. I hung up. William was grinning. That was beautiful. Keep that energy for Thursday. Jennifer Walsh arrived at William's office the next morning with 2 assistants and enough equipment to fill a small office. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and the focused intensity of someone who loved numbers the way most people love their children. Mrs. Highmore, she said, shaking my hand. I've reviewed the preliminary documents William sent. I have some questions. For the next 2 hours, I walked Jennifer through the business. Every detail I could remember, who our major clients were, what our margins looked like, how Percy handled cash transactions, which credit cards the business used, everything. She took notes in a leather-bound book, her handwriting tiny and precise. The business claims gross revenue of $1.2 million annually, she said. Does that sound accurate to you? I thought about it. When I left in 2010, we were doing just over $1 million. Percy said he'd grown it since then. But honestly, our client base was pretty stable. We weren't in growth mode. We were in maintenance mode. Maintenance mode doesn't usually see dramatic revenue increases, Jennifer noted. What about expenses? We ran lean. Percy's always been careful about overhead. Except for the past 3 years. She showed me a preliminary report. Look at this. Client entertainment expenses tripled in 2022. Business travel quadrupled. Professional services, That's a catch-all category, jumped from $15,000 a year to $90,000. The numbers painted a clear picture. He was using the business as his personal piggy bank, I said quietly. That's what I'm going to prove. Jennifer closed her laptop. William told me you have 45 years of records? 12 filing cabinets worth. She actually smiled. Mrs. Highmore, you're my favorite kind of client. Give me 2 weeks. I'll tell you exactly where every dollar went. 2 weeks turned into 3. But when Jennifer came back, she brought a report that made William swear softly under his breath. $427,000, Jennifer announced, sliding the bound report across the conference table. That's what Percy Highmore diverted from business accounts to personal use between January 2021 and July 2024. My hands trembled as I opened the report. Breakdown, Jennifer continued, all business. $78,000 for an apartment in Hartford. 1 bedroom, paid monthly, listed as storage facility in the books. Want to guess who lives there? Victoria, I whispered. Victoria Sterling. Which brings me to something interesting. Jennifer pulled out another document. Victoria Sterling is a CPA. She runs an accounting firm here in Hartford. And guess who she took over the firm from? Howard Sterling, her father. The same Howard Sterling who advised Percy back in 1989 to restructure the business. The room tilted slightly. Howard died in 2020, Jennifer continued. Victoria inherited his client list. In March 2021, Percy hired Sterling Accounting to handle Highmore Automotive's books. 3 months later, in June 2021, the client entertainment and business travel expenses started skyrocketing. William leaned forward. So Victoria wasn't just Percy's mistress. She was his accountant. She knew exactly how the business was structured. She probably helped him hide assets. Oh, she definitely helped him hide assets, Jennifer said. Because here's the kicker. In January 2024, 6 months before Percy asked for a divorce, he transferred $180,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer was processed by Sterling Accounting. Victoria signed off on it. I couldn't breathe. She helped him steal from me. Worse than that. She's a CPA. She has a fiduciary duty to report accurate financial information. If she knowingly helped Percy hide marital assets, that's not just fraud. That's professional misconduct. She could lose her license. William's smile was predatory. Which gives us leverage. Wait, I sadly said. Victoria is Howard Sterling's daughter? The same Howard who told Percy to restructure the business back in 1989? The very same. A terrible thought occurred to me. Did Howard know that Percy was setting me up? Jennifer shook her head. Based on everything I've found, Howard ran a clean practice. Conservative, by the book. I think he gave Percy legitimate tax advice, and Percy weaponized it. Howard died thinking he'd helped a small business optimize its structure. He had no idea Percy was building a trap. But Victoria knew, William said. She's smart, she's trained, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she helped Percy move that money to the Caymans. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Patricia Mills. New settlement terms. $2 million plus the house. Or we go to trial and destroy both Percy and his mistress's career. I grabbed his arm. Wait. Mrs. Highmore, I want to talk to her, Victoria. That's not advisable. I want to look her in the eye. I was surprised by how calm I felt. She helped Percy steal from me. She signed off on the paperwork. She knew I existed, knew I'd worked in that business, and she helped erase me anyway. I want her to admit it. William and Jennifer exchanged glances. Against my better judgment, William finally said, I'll reach out. But Alberta, if you meet with her, I'm there. And you don't say anything that could hurt our case. Understood? Understood. But I was lying. I had plenty I wanted to say to Victoria Sterling. The meeting happened 3 days later at a Starbucks in downtown Hartford. Neutral territory, public space, 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Victoria arrived exactly on time. I'd seen her in photos, but in person she was somehow both more and less than I'd imagined. Beautiful, yes. That kind of polished, expensive beauty that comes from good skincare and regular salon visits. But there was something brittle around her eyes, something uncertain. She sat down across from me. William was at a table nearby, close enough to intervene if needed, but giving us space. "Mrs. Highmore," she said. Her voice was younger than I expected. "Thank you for meeting me." "You wanted to talk," I said. "So talk." She took a breath. "I know you probably think I'm a terrible person, a homewrecker, a gold digger, whatever. But Percy and we connected on a real level. He was lonely in his marriage. He told me you and he hadn't been intimate in years, that you'd grown apart." "How convenient for him to tell you that. I'm just trying to explain." "Explain what, Victoria? That you're not a homewrecker? You just slept with a married man? That you're not a gold digger, you just helped him steal $400,000 from his wife?" Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "The apartment in Hartford, the one listed as storage facility in the business books, the one you live in that Percy pays for, the business trips to Turks and Caicos, to St. Bart's, to Napa, all charged to Highmore Automotive, all signed off on by Sterling Accounting, all approved by you. Those were legitimate business expenses. You're a CPA, Victoria. You know damn well those weren't legitimate business expenses. You helped Percy embezzle from a business I helped build. You're not just the other woman. You're his accomplice." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I love him. We love each other. You can't prosecute people for falling in love." "You're right." I leaned forward. "But I can prosecute you for financial fraud. I can report you to the State Board of Accountancy for professional misconduct. I can make sure everyone in the Hartford business community knows that Sterling Accounting helped a client hide marital assets and commit fraud. You wouldn't try me." We stared at each other across the table. Around us, the Starbucks hummed with normal life. People ordering lattes, typing on laptops, having mundane conversations. And here we were, two women whose lives had become inexplicably tangled, playing a game neither of us had asked for. "What do you want?" Victoria finally asked, her voice small. "I want you to understand something. You think you won, don't you? You got the man, the romance, the excitement. But you know what you actually got? You got a 68-year-old man who's willing to betray someone he promised to love forever, who's willing to steal from his own wife, who spent 45 years building trust just so he could weaponize it." I paused. "You didn't get the fun Percy, Victoria. You got the real Percy, the one who will sacrifice anyone for what he wants. And when you're my age, when you've given him your best years, you'll realize he'll do it to you too." Her tears were falling now, leaving tracks through her carefully applied makeup. "You want to know what the real tragedy is?" I continued, my voice softening despite myself. "Your father helped Percy restructure that business in 1989. He gave honest advice, tried to help a young couple succeed, and you turned his legacy into fraud. You used his reputation, his firm, his name, to help a married man steal from his wife. How would Howard feel about that, Victoria?" She stood abruptly. "I need to go. One more thing." I pulled out a copy of the offshore transfer documents. "January 2024. $180,000 transferred to a Cayman Islands account. Sterling Accounting processed the transfer. You signed off on it. Percy didn't report it on his financial disclosure. That's not just unethical, Victoria. It's illegal. And if we go to trial, this becomes public record. The state board will investigate. You could lose your CPA license. Your father's firm, gone. Was Percy worth that?" Her hands were shaking as she picked up her purse. "Percy told me you were vindictive, that you couldn't handle him being happy." "No, Victoria, I can't handle being erased. There's a difference." She left without another word. Through the window, I watched her hurry to her car, shoulders hunched, phone already to her ear. Calling Percy, probably. Good. William joined me at the table. "How do you feel?" "Tired," I admitted, "and a little sad." "Sad? She's 34. She has her whole life ahead of her. and she's wasting it on a man who's going to do to her exactly what he did to me. I finished my coffee, now cold. But that's not my problem to solve. No, William agreed. Your problem is beating Percy in court, and after that performance, I think we're in good shape. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Please drop the lawsuit. Percy will give you $800,000. Just let us move on with our lives. I showed it to William. He grinned. They're panicking. That's good. Want to respond? I thought about it. Then I typed, no, simple, final, true. That night, lying in Emma's guest room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Victoria's face, about the tears, about how young she'd looked when I mentioned her father. Emma knocked softly and came in with 2 mugs of tea. Can't sleep? Too much on my mind. She sat on the edge of the bed, just like she used to when she was little and had nightmares. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still love Dad? I thought about that. Really thought about it. I love who I thought he was, I finally said. The man I married in 1978. The man who dreamed with me, worked beside me, built a life with me. But Percy, the Percy who exists now? Who was willing to erase 45 years like they meant nothing? I don't know that man. I'm not sure I ever did. Emma squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, Daniel and I are proud of you. You could have given up, taken the $50,000 and walked away. But you're fighting. I'm not fighting for money, sweetheart. I'm fighting to not disappear. I smiled at her. Your father tried to write me out of our story. The business we built, the life we had. In his version, I was just a helper. Just the wife who filed papers and smiled at customers. But I was more than that. I am more than that. And I need the world to know it. They will, Mom. When this is over, everyone will know what you did, what you built, who you are. After Emma left, I finally fell asleep, and I dreamed of filing cabinets, of documents perfectly organized, of a paper trail that would lead straight to justice. 5 days later, we went to trial. The week before trial, Patricia Mills called William with a new offer. $800,000 plus the house, William told me over the phone. Percy keeps the business but buys out your share at fair market value. You'd walk away with just over $1 million in total after the house sale. That's 40% of what we're owed, I said. I was sitting in Emma's living room, watching my grandchildren play in the backyard. Normal life, continuing all around me while my own life hung in balance. It's a substantial improvement from $50,000, William pointed out. And it avoids the risk of trial. Judges are unpredictable, juries more so. We could win big or we could lose. I don't think we'll lose, but there's always risk. He paused. That said, I think we can do better, much better. Jennifer's report is devastating. The offshore account is illegal. Victoria's involvement opens her up to professional sanctions. Percy's in a corner. If we push, no deal, I said. I want this on the record. I want a judge to say officially that I mattered, that my work counted, that Percy tried to steal from me and failed. Even if it means weeks of stress, of watching Percy's lawyer try to tear you down? Especially then. William was quiet for a moment. Then, you're my favorite kind of client, Alberta. The kind who knows what she's fighting for. Okay, no deal. See you in court Monday. That weekend, something unexpected happened. An FBI agent named Rodriguez called William's office. Percy's offshore account, the one in the Cayman Islands, violated federal reporting requirements. Any U.S. citizen with foreign accounts totaling over $10,000 must file a report of foreign bank and financial accounts. Percy hadn't filed anything. The penalty? Up to 50% of the account balance, plus potential criminal charges. The FBI is opening an investigation, William told me on Sunday evening. They want copies of all our financial documents. This is separate from the divorce, but it puts enormous pressure on Percy. He's not just fighting to keep his assets anymore. He's fighting to stay out of federal prison. Will they really prosecute him? For $180,000 unreported? Absolutely. The IRS doesn't joke about offshore accounts, not since the Panama Papers. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that feels like the sky is pressing down on you. I dressed carefully in a navy suit Emma had helped me pick out. Professional, dignified, unshakable. Daniel drove me to the courthouse. He'd taken the week off work to support me, something that meant more than he probably knew, given how close he'd been to Percy. "Mom," he said as we pulled into the parking lot, "I'm sorry for doubting you, for even considering Dad's side of things. Danny, he's your father. It's natural to—" "No." His hands gripped the steering wheel. "I remember you at that office, Mom. I remember you working late, teaching me how to organize files, explaining to me how invoices worked. You were there from the beginning. And when Dad tried to tell me you were just helping, I should have known better." I squeezed his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a judge's bench that looked imposing despite its modest size. Judge Elizabeth Whitmore entered at exactly 9 a.m., a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every excuse, every lie, every half-truth the legal system had to offer. Patricia Mills sat with Percy at the defendant's table. Percy looked different, older. The past months had carved new lines around his mouth, added gray to his stubble. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Patricia's opening statement painted Percy as a self-made man, a mechanic who'd built a successful business through hard work, vision, and personal sacrifice. Alberta, she said, had been a supportive spouse who helped with administrative tasks in the early years, but who had not been meaningfully involved in the business for 15 years. Then William stood. "Your Honor," he said, his voice clear and measured, "this is a case about erasure, about a woman systematically written out of her own story. The evidence will show that Alberta Highmore was not a helper, not an assistant, not a supportive spouse doing administrative tasks. She was a co-founder, an equal partner, a business owner who worked 25 years building something from nothing." He walked to the evidence table, picked up the 1983 business registration. "This is the original registration for Highmore Automotive Solutions, filed with the state of Connecticut on November 3, 1983. Two names appear as owners, Percy James Highmore and Alberta Grace Highmore. Not Percy alone, both of them, equal partners." He placed it carefully on the judge's bench. "The evidence will also show that Mr. Highmore systematically restructured the business to remove his wife's name, using her trust against her. That he then embezzled over $400,000 from that business to fund an extramarital affair. That he hid assets in offshore accounts. That he lied about the business's value in his financial disclosures. And that when Mrs. Highmore discovered these lies, he attempted to bully her into accepting $50,000, 1% of what she was actually owed." William looked directly at Percy. "This isn't a case about a divorce, Your Honor. It's a case about theft. And the evidence will prove it beyond any doubt." I testified on day 2. William led me through my story methodically. Where had I been when the business started? Right there in the garage, answering phones, ordering parts, keeping the books. What were my responsibilities? Everything except the actual mechanical work. How many hours did I work per week? 60, 70 in the early years. 50 once we hired more staff. "Walk us through a typical week in 1987, William said. I closed my eyes, let myself remember. I'd arrive Monday morning at 7. Percy didn't like mornings, so he'd come in around 9. I'd spend those first 2 hours processing any orders that had come in over the weekend, checking inventory, preparing the day's schedule. When Percy arrived, I'd brief him on what needed to be done. Then I'd handle phones. Customer calls, supplier calls, someone's car isn't ready, someone needs a rush job. Around noon, I'd work on bookkeeping. Accounts receivable, accounts payable, payroll on Fridays. Afternoons were usually client management, following up on estimates, handling complaints, building relationships. And you did this for how long? 25 years, from 1983 to 2010, when Percy convinced me to retire. Why did you retire? He said the business was doing well enough that we didn't both need to work. He said I deserved to rest, to enjoy my grandchildren. I looked at Percy. He said I'd earned it. Patricia's cross-examination was sharp, but careful. Mrs. Highmore, were you ever officially on the company payroll? Not after 1990, no. So for 20 years you received no salary. We were married. Percy's income was our income. But legally speaking, you were unemployed for 20 years? Legally speaking, I was a business owner who chose not to draw a separate salary because our tax accountant advised it would be more efficient to keep expenses low. Patricia moved on. You mentioned you retired in 2010. That was 15 years ago. For 15 years, you had nothing to do with the day-to-day operations of Highmore Automotive. That's correct. So you can't speak to the business's current value, its current client base, its current financial situation. I can't speak to the daily operations, no, but I can speak to the foundation I helped build, the systems I put in place, the relationships I developed with suppliers that are still active today. And I can speak to the fact that my husband transferred $180,000 to an offshore account without my knowledge while we were still married. That money was earned during our marriage. It's a marital asset. And he tried to hide it. Patricia's jaw tightened. No further questions. Day 3 brought documentary evidence. William presented the 1983 registration, the tax returns, the letters signed Percy and Alberta Highmore, co-proprietors. He called Bobby Williams, who'd worked at Highmore Automotive from 1985 to 2005. What was Mrs. Highmore's role in the business? William asked. Bobby, now in his 60s with white hair and weathered hands, didn't hesitate. She ran the office, period. Percy was the best mechanic I ever knew. But Alberta? She made that place work. She knew every customer by name, every supplier's delivery schedule, every dollar coming in and going out. The place would have fallen apart without her. Patricia tried to shake him on cross. But Mr. Highmore owned the business, correct? Percy's name was on the building, yeah, but anyone who worked there knew it was Alberta's place as much as his. More, maybe. Percy would have been happy just fixing cars. Alberta turned it into a real business. Then came Jennifer Walsh, who walked Judge Whitmore through the forensic audit with devastating precision. $427,000 diverted to personal use, apartment rent for Victoria, business trips that were actually romantic getaways, jewelry, clothing, dinners, all charged to Highmore Automotive, all approved by Sterling Accounting, all hidden from Alberta. And the offshore account? William asked. Opened January 15, 2024. $180,000 transferred from the business operating account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Highmore is the sole signatory. The account was never disclosed on his financial filings. This is a violation of federal reporting requirements under FBR, Foreign Bank Account Report Regulations. Judge Whitmore made notes. Lots of notes. Chem. Day 4. Percy took the stand. Patricia walked him through his version of events gently. How he'd started the business. How hard he'd worked. How Alberta had helped, yes, but mostly with administrative support. How he'd grown the business over 40 years. How he deserved to keep what he'd built. Then William stood for cross-examination. Mr. Highmore, you testified that you started the business. But I'm showing you the original registration from 1983. Can you read the ownership line? Percy's hands trembled slightly as he held the document. Owners: Percy James Highmore and Alberta Grace Highmore. Not Percy Highmore with administrative support from his wife. Not Percy Highmore and his helper. Both names, equal ownership, correct? That was just, we were married. It was a formality. A formality. William picked up another document. This is a letter you wrote to a parts supplier in March 1986. Can you read the signature line? Percy's voice was barely audible. Percy and Alberta Highmore, co-proprietors. Co-proprietors, not owner and assistant. Co-proprietors. William let that hang in the air. When did you decide to restructure the business to remove your wife's name? 1990, on advice from our accountant for tax purposes. Howard Sterling. Yes. And did Mr. Sterling advise you to keep the restructuring secret from your wife? No, Alberta knew. Did he advise you to use that restructuring to eventually cut your wife out of the business entirely? No. But that's what you did, isn't it? William held up Percy's handwritten note. I'm showing you a document dated October 15th, 1989. Your handwriting? Percy's face went pale. Yes. Read it, please. Specifically the line that says, Alberta trusts me. Percy stared at the paper. The courtroom was completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Mr. Highmore, read it. Alberta agrees. She trusts me. His voice cracked. You documented her trust. Why? I don't know. You don't know why you wrote down that your wife trusted you while you were planning to restructure the business to exclude her? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Mr. Highmore? Explain it to us. And something in Percy broke. Your Honor, he said, looking past William, past Patricia, straight at Judge Whitmore. I need to say something. My lawyer told me not to, but I can't lie under oath anymore. Patricia half stood. Mr. Highmore, please. Alberta was my equal partner until 1980, Percy said, his words coming faster now, like water breaking through a dam. Everything she said is true. She ran the office, managed the books, built the client relationships. I fixed cars. That's what I was good at. That's all I was good at. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Whitmore's gavel came down once. Continue, Mr. Highmore. Howard Sterling told me to restructure for tax purposes, and that was true. But I wanted control. I wanted to be able to say I built this business. Just me. Not we. I. He looked at me finally, tears in his eyes. When Alberta trusted me to handle the restructuring, I used that trust. I took her name off everything slowly, over years, until it was just mine. And when she believed me that it was just paperwork, I knew I'd gotten away with it. Patricia was frantically scribbling notes, probably planning damage control. And when I met Victoria, Percy continued, I saw a way out. A new life where I was Percy the successful businessman, not Percy whose wife kept his books. I tried to erase Alberta from our story because I couldn't face the truth, that I needed her, that I always needed her, that everything I have I built on her work, her trust, her years of sacrifice. He was crying openly now. Alberta, I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but you deserve half of everything. You deserve more than half. And I'm telling the judge officially on the record you were my equal partner. You earned everything, and I tried to steal it from you. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Whitmore looked at Patricia. Does defense wish to redirect? Patricia looked at Percy, at the document spread across the bench, at me. No, Your Honor. No further questions. Judge Whitmore delivered her ruling the next afternoon. We all stood as she entered. Percy looked like he hadn't slept. Neither had I, honestly. I'd spent the night replaying his testimony, trying to understand what I felt. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even vindication. Just a deep, aching sadness for 45 years that had ended in this sterile courtroom with confessions and tears. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony, Judge Whitmore began. This is one of the more clear-cut cases of marital fraud I've seen in 20 years on the bench. She looked at Percy. Mr. Highmore's own testimony confirms what the documentary evidence showed, that Alberta Highmore was an equal partner in Highmore Automotive Solutions from its founding in 1983, that she worked 25 years building the business, that Mr. Highmore systematically restructured the company to exclude her, using her trust as a weapon against her. Judge Whitmore's voice hardened. The forensic evidence shows deliberate embezzlement of marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. The evidence shows fraudulent financial disclosures. The evidence shows an unreported foreign bank account. Mr. Highmore lied, stole, and attempted to deprive his wife of her rightful share of property she helped create. She looked at her notes. Therefore, I rule as follows. First, Highmore Automotive Solutions is declared marital property. The business will be independently appraised, but I'm accepting the forensic accountant's valuation of $3.2 million. Mrs. Highmore is entitled to 60% of the business value, $1.92 million, as compensation for fraud, dissipation of assets, and the court's finding that her contributions were systematically undervalued. I heard Patricia whisper urgently to Percy. Second, Mr. Highmore must reimburse the marital estate for the $427,000 he embezzled. This amount is awarded to Mrs. Highmore in addition to her business share. Third, the marital home, valued at $850,000, is awarded entirely to Mrs. Highmore. Fourth, Mr. Highmore will pay Mrs. Highmore's legal fees, currently totaling $160,000. Judge Whitmore looked directly at Percy. Fifth, I am referring this case to the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding the unreported foreign account. I'm also referring the matter of Sterling Accounting's involvement to the Connecticut State Board of Accountancy for review of potential professional misconduct. She closed her folder. Total award to Mrs. Highmore, approximately $2.9 million, or 67% of marital assets. Mr. Highmore may retain the remaining business equity after satisfying this judgment. The business partners may choose to buy out either or both parties. Mrs. Highmore has 90 days to decide whether to retain ownership interest or accept a buyout. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Emma and Daniel rushed forward, hugging me. William was grinning. Former employees who'd come to watch were shaking my hand. I looked back at Percy. He sat slumped in his chair, Patricia leaning over him, speaking urgently. Victoria had appeared from somewhere in the back, crying. Percy looked up. Our eyes met, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, no lingering love, just a quiet sense of closure. Justice had been served. 6 months later, I stood in my garden planting tomatoes. The house I'd bought wasn't large. A modest colonial in West Hartford, 3 bedrooms, a yard big enough for a garden, but not so big I couldn't maintain it. I'd paid $420,000 cash. No mortgage. No one to answer to. The business partners had bought me out within 30 days of the judgment. $1.7 million, more than the appraised value. They wanted Percy out and were willing to pay for leverage. Percy had been forced to sell his share, too. After paying what he owed me, plus legal fees, plus the IRS penalties, he'd walked away with just under $400,000. Not destitute, but not what he'd expected. I'd invested the rest conservatively. Bonds, dividend stocks, a financial advisor Emma had recommended. It generated about $72,000 a year in passive income, more than enough to live comfortably. I was also volunteering 3 days a week at a women's legal aid clinic, helping other women going through divorce, teaching them what I'd learned. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Don't let anyone erase you. "Mom," Emma called from the back door. "Lunch is ready." She visited every Sunday with the grandkids. Daniel came too, when his work schedule allowed. We'd have lunch, work in the garden, play with the kids. Normal life. I'd heard through Emma that Percy was working as a consultant for an auto parts distributor, making decent money, enough to live on. Still with Victoria, though apparently the relationship was strained. Money problems. She'd kept her CPA license. The state board had issued a reprimand, but no suspension. But several clients had left. Reputation damage. And Victoria was pregnant. Emma had mentioned it casually last month. Percy, at 69, starting over with a baby. I felt sorry for him, in a distant way. Sorry for what he'd lost. Sorry for what he'd destroyed. But mostly I felt free. "Emma," I said as we sat down to lunch, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I did the right thing, fighting the way I did? I could have taken $800,000 and avoided the trial, the stress, all of it." Emma looked at me seriously. "Mom, you didn't fight for money. You fought to not disappear. And that's exactly what you would have done if you'd taken that settlement. You would have accepted Percy's version of history, that you were just the helper, just the wife who filed papers. But you weren't. You were a business owner, a partner, someone who built something real and valuable. She squeezed my hand. The world knows that now. The court said it officially. And every woman who hears your story will know. You can stand up. You can fight. You can refuse to be erased. That's worth more than any settlement. After lunch, after Emma and the kids left, I stayed in the garden as the sun began to set. The tomato plants were already showing tiny green buds. By August, I'd have more tomatoes than I could eat. I'd make sauce, give jars to Emma and Daniel, maybe bring some to the legal aid clinic. Small pleasures, simple joys, a life that was entirely, completely mine. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Alberta, this is Percy. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better. I hope you're well. I stared at it for a long moment, considered responding, decided against it. There was nothing left to say. He'd said everything that mattered on that witness stand. The apology was real. I believed that. But it didn't change anything. It didn't undo 45 years of choices. It didn't erase the hurt. I deleted the text and put my phone away. The sun was setting, painting my small garden in gold and amber light. Somewhere nearby, children were laughing. A dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal neighborhood. I thought about the woman I'd been at 72. Terrified, betrayed, sitting in a storage unit at midnight, searching for proof that she'd mattered. I thought about the woman I was now at 73, standing in her own garden, in her own home, living her own life. What did I learn? That it's never too late to stand up for yourself. That documentation isn't just about organization. It's about leaving proof that you existed, that your work mattered, that you were here. That trust is precious, but self-respect is more precious still. I spent 45 years believing I knew my husband. I was wrong. But in the process of losing him, I found something more important. I found myself.